Hello, and thanks so much for watching Proactive New York. I'm Christine Corrado. With me right now is Gerald Commissiong, CEO at Todos Medical. Gerald, it's good to see you. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks for asking. Gerald, the company has received a $3.4 million investment from tech-focused venture capital firm Yozma Group Korea. Can you tell me a bit about them first?
Yeah, sure. So Yozma was originally founded in Israel. So they started the venture capital industry in Israel and then had a group move out to Korea to take benefit of all the technology that was being developed there that wasn't, emerging out into the rest of the world. So, it's a cross-border fund. Obviously, with Todos being headquartered initially in Israel, on the background there was a strong interest in what was going on in Israel and how we could bring that innovation to the world. And Yozma saw that potential and really is helping foster both us getting access to interesting technology in Korea, and now also actually some of the technology we're developing out of Israel, bringing that into Korea and other jurisdictions.
Yeah, can you maybe talk a bit more about how you'll use the 3.4 million?
Sure. So, the introduction to Yozma was by our board director, Lauren Chung. And primarily the idea was, Todos had to take on some debt initially over the last year and a half to kind of fuel its growth. That debt was pretty expensive and had certain features to it were not really friendly to shareholders. And so the idea being that now the company is profitable and generating significant cash flow, that if we could refinance that debt at rates that made a lot more sense and were more beneficial, that it would allow the company to grow. And also, in parallel with that, we get an anchor institutional investor that is looking to really help drive value as we move forward. So, we feel, very fortunate that we're able to bring in this investor. And we're going to use the money to clean up the debt, as I mentioned, as well as to acquire Vivus Diagnostics, which is a company for which we've had an exclusive option to acquire them for about a year. We've been funding the growth of the lab where they're now doing PCR testing. So, and as opposed to most of our sales are selling reagents to other labs, we now have our own lab where we'll be putting automation and being able to do testing to drive growth. And that will be the base of operations for all of our technologies. That's both the COVID testing, the breast cancer testing, our own spectroscopy breast cancer testing, and our LimPro Alzheimer's testing.
Yeah, from my understanding, Vivus Diagnostics really gives you their Videssa breast cancer test. Is that right?
That's right. So the Videssa breast cancer test has been in the market previously. It had over $50 million invested into it by a private equity firm. Unfortunately, at that time, they didn't have a unique CPT code, so they could get reimbursement, and that really put a ceiling on their ability to generate revenue. So our strategy, as laid out last year, pre-COVID, was to bring that technology in-house, bring it back into the market in a measured way, conduct the appropriate study to get our own CPT code, and then piggyback the development of the Todos spectroscopy platform. So we could gather data on the Todos platform from those same samples that we're getting the breast cancer Videssa platform. And then we could link the two, which would really create a very, very unique situation of having two assays developed together that could really drive a lot of value in a short period of time. So that's been our strategy for that, and we're pretty comfortable.
And you mentioned the coronavirus PCR testing, and I know usually every month you kind of give a report about the demand for that. So what's the latest that you've seen there?
Look, demand is going up. Obviously everybody wants, rapid antigen testing. Unfortunately, as we saw with reports about the Abbott test recently, they're just not very accurate. And the missing of those asymptomatic carriers, especially with these new variants that are more difficult to capture and are spreading more rapidly, is making it, virtually impossible to catch these asymptomatic carriers. So you're going to need more rapid testing, and you're also going to need a lot more PCR testing. And so we see both of those going higher. And that's one of the main reasons under this new administration that we think having a lab is going to be very, very valuable, where we can run our own testing with demand going up. And then we can introduce our own tests into the market, such as our 3CL protease assay, which is nearing the completion of its clinical trial. And we expect to have some announcements there, as well as the related Tolivit, the protease inhibitor that we expect will have some very significant news in the near future.
We'll look forward to that. Just quickly before I let you go, so can your current coronavirus PCR test detect the new mutant virus?
As far as we've seen so far, the answer is yes. So we're looking at 2 specific gene sequences that are not impacted by these new variants. However, we all know that additional mutations are coming. They're probably already out there, and we just don't know it because there's not enough next-gen sequencing. So we intend to, to continue to supply and conduct PCR testing. We expect that we're going to be doing some next-gen sequencing testing as well to really start looking at, variations. And then additionally, we know, because our P3CL assay is not looking for the sequence, but is looking for the enzyme that is required for the virus to replicate, that it's really variant independent, and that should be able to capture all of these variants. It's a different kind of assay. And so we think layering, these technologies over one another is really going to be the path forward. And early diagnosis followed with early treatment, potentially with Tolivit, could be a path forward.
Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing more about that. Gerald, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.